Part 44. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 431. Xiao Jinyan was startled when he heard the word Fengguiyu. How did he know who Fengguiyu was? After many investigations with no results, he had given up. But the man in black comes to the door again, and I don't know what their relationship is. I don't know. Oh, Shenchu lowered his head slightly and looked at the snowball in his arms. He didn't know who the man in black was. Why deal with Xiao Jinyan? Back in the tent, Shen Chuwei put down the snowball and pulled Xiao Jinyan towards the bed. Xiao Jinyan looked at her actions in confusion. What are you doing? Diagnose your highness's pulse. The man in black was so cruel. He was bleeding, Shen Chuwei said angrily. The man in black was too cheap to take laxatives. Only then did Xiao Jinyan remember Xiao Ju's medical skills. He followed her to the couch and sat down, letting her diagnose his pulse. Shen Chuwei's delicate brows furrowed. His Royal Highness suffered internal injuries, which are somewhat serious. He needs to be recuperated and recuperated. The man in black was extremely skilled in martial arts. He was hit twice and suffered internal injuries for sure. I know. Shen Chuwei said indignantly while preparing the medicine. It's true that the man in black is the man in black. Snow Tuan is clearly his highness's pet, but he still wants to snatch it away. It's too domineering. Xiao Jinyan listened to Xiao Ju's dissatisfied complaints and raised the corners of his lips slightly. He looked at the snowball on the couch, lying there lazily. He raised Xue Tuan by himself and would never allow others to take it away. Just then, there were several whimpers. Shen Chu turned her head slightly to hear the sound. When she saw the wooden frame, she thought of the little milk tiger. She stood up and came to the frame. When she lowered her head, she saw the little milk tiger pouting in grievance. Well? Are you hungry? Shen Chu slightly bent down and picked up the little milk tiger, calling for Chengzi. Chengzi ran all the way in and saw the little guy in Shen Chuwei's arms. She didn't recognize it as a tiger cub and just thought it was cute. Master, it's so cute. Of course, they are the cutest when they are young, Shen Chuwei ordered. Prepare some goat milk. Okay, Chengzi ran out happily. When she came back, she had an extra glass of goat's milk. Shen Chuwei took the goat milk and handed it to the little milk tiger's mouth, feeding it carefully for fear of choking the little milk tiger. Xiao Jinyan suffered internal injuries and was lying on the couch. Watching Shen Chuwei taking care of the little milk tiger, he suddenly felt that he had done something wrong. With Xiao Nehu, Xiao Ju forgot that he was a patient who needed more care. After Shen Chuwei finished feeding the baby, she walked to the couch and sat down in front of the couch. She said with some worry, Your Highness, did you catch this baby tiger? If the baby tiger's parents find that the baby tiger is missing, they will be worried. What should I do? Xiao Jinyan said, When I saw it, its mother was already dead, along with 2 other tiger cubs. I saw how cute it was, so I brought it back. Shen Chu secretly breathed a sigh of relief and looked down at the little milk tiger in his arms. He curled up and fell asleep in her arms as soon as he was full. It turns out it's an orphan, and I'm here to raise it. Xiao Jinyan looked at the little tiger in her arms. He was very fierce when he first picked it up, but it became very good when Shen Chuwei held it. He suddenly remembered that Shen Chuwei had helped him to train the wolf before. So it's not unreasonable for Sichuan to like Shen Chuwei from the beginning. At this time, in a certain hut, the man in black has opened the latrine door for the nth time, and his legs are a little weak. He tried to remember that the food he ate today would not cause diarrhea. So what exactly caused it? When the man in black came out of the latrine, he took a deep breath and was about to leave, but within a few steps he held his stomach and opened the latrine door and went in. When the man in black held the door and came out, his legs began to tremble. Chu Zhao stepped forward to support the man in black. Master, Are you okay? The man in black said tremblingly, do you think I'm fine? My subordinate's eyesight is stupid. Chu Zhao asked worriedly, Master, what did you eat today? The man in black gritted his teeth and said, don't you know best what I eat? After saying that, he turned around and walked into the latrine, holding his stomach, and then closed the door. Chu Zhao stood outside and was so anxious that he shouted inside, Master, do you want to call a doctor? The man in black asked angrily, is there a doctor here? Chu Zhao thought about it for a while. This was a royal paddock. Apart from the imperial doctor inside, there really were no doctors nearby. What should we do? Master. The man in black said weakly, shut up. Chu Zhao closed his mouth when he heard this. After the medicine took effect, the man in black was helped out by Chu Zhao. He was completely exhausted. The man in black boasted that he was always in good health in all aspects. This was the first time he had experienced diarrhea and collapse. It was like a ghost. At this time in the palace, Susu hadn't seen Shen Shuwei for several days, and every day she would bother her nanny to take her out to play. Since the last incident, the wet nurse has not dared to hold the babies to play in the yard. It's just that Susu is clamoring to go, but the nanny can't do anything. I can only hold it. In October, the autumn chrysanthemums are already blooming in the yard, and there are also peonies. Susu was very happy to see the bright flowers. When the nanny saw that Susu liked it, she carried her to the peony flowers. The weather was fine today, and the Queen Mother felt a little bored staying in Sinning Palace, so she went out for a walk. Ever since Wan Xian went hunting in Kaiwei, Chang Liangyuan went to Sinning Palace to serve him every day. Thinking that both the prince and the princess went hunting in Kaiwei, only Chang Liangyuan was left, so she came down to the East Palace with the help of her grandmother. From a distance, I saw the wet nurse playing in the yard with Susu in her arms. And you asked, Queen Mother, do you want to go over and have a look? The Queen Mother looked at Susu for a few times and shook her head, no, go and sit at Chang Liangyuan's place. Nanny Yu said nothing more, supported the Queen Mother and went to Chang Liangyuan. For several days in a row while walking around the East Palace, the Queen Mother saw the wet nurse playing outside with Susu in her arms. The Queen Mother didn't take it to heart and still didn't go over to take a look. Today the peonies are almost in full bloom, and the Queen Mother can see them from a distance when she comes to the East Palace. Then I saw the wet nurse holding Susu and playing in front of the peonies. Susu was so excited when she touched the peony petals that she grabbed the petals with her fleshy little hands and refused to let go. Mom, Mom. Susu looked at the petals, lowered her head and opened her mouth to bite the petals, but luckily the nanny noticed and stopped her in time. Little ancestor, you can't eat these flowers. Susu grabbed the petals and said, Daddy, Daddy. The Queen Mother happened to see Susu opening her mouth and biting the petals. Why is this child still eating flowers? Is he hungry? So is the nanny. Why don't you take the child to nurse? Grandma Yu looked at how cute Susu was and asked, Queen Mother, do you want to go over and have a look? The Queen Mother said, go and take a look at the children. Aunt Yu happily responded, okay. When the wet nurse saw the Queen Mother coming, she quickly hugged Susu and saluted, Happy Queen Mother. Queen Mother, get up. Thank you, Queen Mother. The nanny stood up holding Susu in her arms. Susu stared at the Queen Mother with a pair of big black and bright eyes. She was holding a petal in her little hand and waving to the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother looked at Susu for a while and said, the AI family hasn't seen Susu for a while. Has Susu lost weight? The wet nurse said, back to the Queen Mother, Susu wanted the princess to eat less in the past few days, but she has been much better in the past 2 days. No wonder I seem to have lost weight. You slaves should serve me with all your heart, you know, the Queen Mother scolded. The Queen Mother taught you a lesson, and all the slaves have remembered it, the wet nurse responded in a low voice. Mommy, Mommy. Susu stuffed the petals in her hand into the Queen Mother's hand. The Queen Mother was originally curious about Susu's behavior, until she saw her fleshy little hand holding a petal, which was her favorite peony flower. When Grandma Yu saw it, she smiled and said, "Susu knows that the Queen Mother likes peonies, so she specially picked them and gave them to the Queen Mother." The Queen Mother was so happy that she couldn't open her mouth from ear to ear. Susu saw the adults laughing, and she laughed too. The Queen Mother was even more happy when she heard Susu's laughter. "Let Ijia hug Susu." The wet nurse hesitated for a while, then handed the cake in her arms to the Queen Mother. Susu refused to accept the fact that she was hugged by the Queen Mother. She looked at the Queen Mother more curiously, and then grinned. The Queen Mother has never seen a child who likes to laugh so much. The way she smiles is very cute. Royal enclosure. The Emperor and Prince were all injured, and hunting became a free activity. It was rare for Xiao Jinyan to get up early. He looked down at Xiaoju, who was sleeping soundly in his arms, and couldn't help but lower his head to kiss her. Zhang Xiang, who was sleeping slightly at the beginning, suddenly felt difficulty breathing. He needed a few breaths, and suddenly opened his eyes, and saw the handsome face close at hand. "Woke up." Shen Chu rubbed his sleepy eyes slightly and said with some dissatisfaction, "Your Highness, why are you disturbing people's dreams so early in the morning?" Shen Chuwei, who had just woken up, had a soft voice, which seemed to be coquettish or angry. Xiao Jinyan hugged her slender waist close to him and chuckled, "How long has it been? Are you still sleeping? Your Highness hasn't gotten up yet." In Shen Chuwei's subconscious mind, Xiao Jinyan's not getting up meant that it was still early. Xiao Jinyan said, "I was lazy today and stayed in bed with you." Shen Chuwei. The sun comes out in the west. After getting up and having breakfast, Shen Chuwei lay down on the bed and wanted to go back to sleep again. Then she saw Xuetuan jumping on the bed with a little baby tiger in her mouth and walking towards her. She went to see it together and was stunned. Xuetuan actually knew this skill? I saw Xuetuan holding the little nanny by the neck and putting the little nanny in her hand. He looked at the nanny and pouted, suddenly realizing that the little nanny was hungry. He quickly told Chengzi to get goat milk. After the little milk tiger had eaten and drank enough, he lay quietly on Shen Chuwei's belly to sleep. At that moment, Shen Chuwei had the illusion that the little milk tiger thought of himself as a tiger mother. That's not right. Snowball is holding it in his mouth and running away. Shouldn't he regard Snowball as tiger daddy? Thinking of this, Shen Chu turned his head slightly and looked at Xuetuan, only to see him lying on the couch taking a lazy nap. She picked up the little milk tiger and put it next to Xuetuan's belly. To cultivate feelings, you need to have a little milk tiger grab it when. Xuetuan looked at the little milk tiger sleeping on his belly, with a confused look on his face. Ever since concubine Su got the sensing goo, she didn't pick it up to take a look at it. She just picked it up with anticipation and put it down with disappointment. Suddenly, the induction goo screamed twice and jumped twice. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 432. Concubine Su couldn't wait to pick up the small bell, and saw it jumping twice in her palm. She looked around excitedly. At this time, she was in the tent. At a glance, except for some simple furnishings, it was a beige tent, and there was no shadow of the man in black. She looked down at the small bell in her hand, and it jumped twice again, making a crisp sound at the same time. Concubine Su held the small bell tightly and ran out in a hurry. It was the time of lighting, and the tent was shrouded in darkness. Torches were lit outside, and there were many guards patrolling around. Maybe because there were guards patrolling, the man in black didn't dare to approach. Concubine Su thought of this possibility, so she lifted her skirt and walked to the back of the tent. There was a forest behind, with few people and remote. Concubine Su was grabbed by a hand by the arm after walking for a while, which scared her hair. "It's me." She was relieved when she heard the voice of the man in black. She looked back at the man in black. In the pitch-black night, the man in black in night clothes blended into the night. She could only feel the pressure from his height. "Why did you come here? If you are discovered by the patrolling guards, you will be finished." The man in black didn't care at all. "Since I came here, I can definitely leave. They can't stop me." Concubine Su knew that the man in black was very powerful, but she couldn't help but complain, saying that he only knew how to brag. "You came to see me?" The man in black nodded, "Yes." Concubine Su was secretly happy, but then she heard the man in black say, "I came to see you to ask you, when did Xiao Jinyan start raising the pet Sichuan? And where did he get it from?" Concubine Su asked in confusion, "Why are you asking this?" The man in black said, "Of course it's useful, you answer my question first." Concubine Su thought for a while and said, "I don't know either. I only know that His Highness's pet was raised by him and he loves it very much. And Sichuan is very fierce, and ordinary people can't get close to him." The man in black asked, "What about you?" Concubine Su shook her head, "I dare not get close to Sichuan. I was scratched by Sichuan 2 years ago." The man in black frowned when he heard this. Sichuan didn't seem to be so fierce. Maybe because he grew up. Sichuan was raised by Xiaju, and he rarely cared about it. He had no way of knowing whether it was true or not. It's just that Xiaju disappeared and Xiao Jinyan had a pet like Xiaju, which was too coincidental. What made him most angry was that Xiao Jinyan said he didn't remember Xiaoju. Xiaoju shouldn't have protected him in the first place. The man in black couldn't help but curse, "White-eyed wolf." Concubine Su found that the man in black tonight was a little different from the past. He cursed with anger. "Who is the white-eyed wolf?" The man in black was not polite at all, "Xiao Jinyan." Concubine Su was stunned at first, and then asked in confusion, "Your Highness is not good to say that, but His Highness is still a very good person." The man in black snorted, "He is good. He is good enough to let you stay alone in an empty room for more than 2 years. Doesn't he know how precious a woman's youth is?" Concubine Su was stunned. For more than 2 years, she had long forgotten the term staying alone in an empty room and had long since stopped considering Xiao Jinyan as her husband. She thought Xiao Jinyan was good because he was loyal. Compared with those men with 3 wives and 4 concubines, he was much better. "Why are you so fierce?" "Xiao Jinyan didn't let me sleep with him because he is devoted to her." The man in black, "Idiot." Concubine Su was so angry, "Why are you cursing?" The man in black asked back, "Am I wrong?" "You are the only one who is smart." Concubine Su was really angry this time. She turned around and left after yelling, but the man in black grabbed her wrist in time and pulled her back. He looked at Concubine Su in confusion, "Why are you running?" Concubine Su struggled hard, but she was not as strong as the man in black. Even if she used all her strength, she still couldn't open the man in black's hand. "Let me go." The man in black found that Concubine Su's voice was not right. He reached out to touch her face. His fingertips touched a touch of moisture, which was cooler than the lake water at night. He was stunned. Concubine Su grew up spoiled. She was spoiled by her parents and brothers in the general's mansion. No one dared to be fierce to her. After entering the palace, Xiao Jinyan had never been so fierce to her. The man in black was mean to her, and she couldn't stand it and cried. The man in black took out a handkerchief from his bosom and wiped the tears from her cheeks. "Why are you crying? People who don't know would think I bullied you." Concubine Su choked twice, "No one has ever been mean to me since I was a child. Why are you mean to me? I didn't do anything wrong." The man in black paused in wiping, and couldn't help but reflect on why he was mean to her. Concubine Su was not favored and didn't sleep with the emperor. Even if she left the palace in the future, she would have no worries about food and clothing with her powerful family. It's just that she is old and suffers some criticism. Why is he so angry? If Xiao Jinyan is really good, he should let you out of the palace now, instead of wasting time in the palace. The man in black suddenly became gentle in his tone, which made Concubine Su stunned for a long time. After Concubine Su left, the man in black stood there and watched the petite figure approach the tent. Just now, for a moment, he wanted to ask her if she wanted to leave the palace. With his ability, it would be no problem to take her out of the palace. Chu Zhaoquan, who was hiding in the dark, saw what happened just now. In the past, the master would not let him follow him into the palace. Now he understood that Concubine Su was still a girl. The master actually wiped the tears of Concubine Su. Look at her distressed look, tut tut. After Concubine Su walked away, Chu Zhao jumped out from the dark. Master, if we like her, why don't we just take her back? Otherwise, when she leaves the palace, she will be an old maid. Before he finished speaking, he was hit hard by the man in black. Can you speak? Chu Zhao covered his forehead and found a lump, which was enough to show how angry the master was. The man in black retracted his gaze and turned away. Chu Zhao chased after him. Master, I have inquired. In the Great Xia Palace, maids can choose to leave the palace when they reach 25. The prince's women can also choose to leave the palace if they have not served the prince at the age of 25. Other women are already mothers of several children at the age of 25. The man in black. Asterisk. After Shen Shuwei finished breakfast, he checked Xiao Jinyan's pulse and checked his injuries. He was better than the day before, mainly because the man in black was too heavy. Seeing her nervous look, Xiao Jinyan comforted her. I'm fine, you don't need to worry. Whether your highness is fine or not, I know better than you. Shen Shuwei took back her hand and prepared the medicine again. Internal injuries are not as good as external injuries, and they need to be slowly treated. Xiao Jinyan sighed helplessly. It's really not easy to be perfunctory with medical skills. Shen Shuwei prepared the medicine and gave it to Chengzi to boil. The little tiger raised his head and looked at Shen Shuwei on the couch. It tried to climb up, but its limbs were short and weak. Its chubby little body hit the pedal and bounced out directly. After repeating several times, the little tiger turned its head to look at Sichuan, who was sleeping on the side. It ran over with its short legs and used its equally furry head to push Sichuan's head. Sichuan opened one eye and saw that it was the little tiger. It closed its eyes and pretended not to see it. It knew it was disturbing its sleep. The little tiger nudged for a long time, but Sichuan ignored it, so it had to stretch out its claws to scratch Sichuan's face, and then lick Sichuan's cheeks as if to show its goodwill. Sichuan, who was licked with saliva, had no hope of life. So annoying. The little tiger was not discouraged and continued to please. Sichuan was tortured and couldn't sleep, so he had to open his eyes, slowly stood up, lowered his head and picked up the little tiger's neck in one bite, and when he walked, he dragged the little tiger. Even a little tiger born 10 days ago is only a little smaller than Sichuan. If Sichuan was not strong, he would not be able to pick up the little tiger. The little body that was picked up from the bed, let Sichuan hold it and jump onto the couch with a comfortable look. After coming up, Sichuan put the little tiger down as if he was disgusted. After the little tiger came down, it walked in front of Shen Shuwei with its short limbs and scratched Shen Shuwei's sleeves with its little claws. Shen Shuwei was checking Xiao Jinyan's chest, where the man in black hit. There were 2 palm prints. When she found someone pulling her sleeve, she looked down in confusion and saw the little white tiger trying to grab and scratch her sleeve. Wasn't the little white tiger on the ground? How did it get to the couch? Seeing the snowball beside her, she suddenly realized that it must have been the snowball that brought the little white tiger up. Xiao Jinyan followed Shen Shuwei's line of sight and saw the little white tiger scratching Xiaoju's clothes, making low noises from time to time, just to attract Xiaoju's attention. What is it doing? It's probably hungry. Shen Shuwei turned around and picked up the little tiger, picked up the glass cup on the low table, and the goat milk in it was prepared in advance. The little tiger squinted happily after drinking the goat milk. Shen Shuwei looked at the little white tiger drinking milk and laughed. The little white tiger is so cute. Xiao Jinyan. Since it is a pet, of course it must have a name. What name should we give it? Shen Shuwei turned her head to look at Xiao Jinyan. Your Highness, what name do you think it should be? Xiao Jinyan glanced at Xiao Beihu lightly. You should choose it. Shen Shuwei stared at the little white tiger for a while. Call it rice ball? Tang Yuan. It doesn't feel domineering enough. She suddenly had an idea. How about calling it Dabai? Xiaobai will definitely be cute and fierce when he grows up. Xiao Jinyan thought of the dead big white tiger. If it hadn't died, that body would be really fierce. As long as you like it. Shen Shuwei retracted her gaze and looked at Xiaobai's soft body and said, Dao Tao and Susu will definitely like Dabai too. Later, wherever Susu went, there would be 2 bodyguards behind her, one Dabai and one Swichuan, and she became a little group pet in the palace that no one dared to mess with. Xiao Jinyan came out of the tent and went straight to the meeting tent. Wei Qi strode in. Xiao Jinyan asked sternly, have you found any news about the man in black? Wei Qi said, Master, we haven't found out the origin of the man in black yet, but I found concubine Su's behavior suspicious last night. Xiao Jinyan asked coldly, how suspicious? Last night, I found concubine Su suddenly came out of the tent and went to the woods. I saw from a distance that concubine Su seemed to meet the man in black. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 433. Wei Qi also ran into him by accident last night, but he didn't dare to get too close because he was afraid of being discovered. Xiao Jinyan couldn't believe it. Concubine Su, who had always had a good relationship with Xiaoju, would know the man in black. Did they meet last night to tip off or do something? Are you sure concubine Su went to see the man in black? Could it be someone else? My lord, I only saw the person who met concubine Su wearing night clothes. I didn't dare to get close, for fear of being discovered by the other party and alerting the enemy, Wei Qi said. Xiao Jinyan fell into deep thought. Concubine Su was the legitimate daughter of General Su, and the man in black was not a citizen of De Xia. How could concubine Su know the man in black? Don't make this public in advance. You should keep an eye on concubine Su at all times. If they have a relationship, they will definitely meet again. Wei Qi clasped his fists and accepted the order. I obey your order. After Wei Qi left, Xiao Jinyan would think that concubine Su had been very close to Xiaoju in the past 3 years since she entered the palace. It can be said that they had a very good relationship. Her temperament had not changed much, but her mentality had changed a lot. He really didn't understand why concubine Su was suddenly related to the man in black. Xiao Jinyan didn't think about it anymore. He thought of the powder and ointment that Xiaoju gave him, which were very good for healing wounds, so he took the ointment to the emperor's tent. After the emperor was injured, he had been resting in bed. The queen took care of him personally, and their relationship was eased a lot because of this danger. When Xiao Jinyan came, he saw the queen feeding the emperor water. He stepped forward a few steps to greet him, father, mother. The emperor was enjoying the world of 2 people with the queen, and when he saw the prince coming, his face immediately darkened. Is there anything the prince is here for? Father, I'm here to deliver medicine, Xiao Jinyan said, taking out 2 small bottles, one blue and one white, from his sleeve pocket, and introduced, the white one is the powder, which is very effective in healing wounds, and the blue one is just the ointment, which is also good for removing scars. The queen said happily when she heard it, "Really? Bring it over to me quickly." Its mother Xiao Jinyan took 2 steps forward and handed the ointment in his hand to the queen. The queen carefully looked at the 2 small bottles in her hand. Why use such a precious ointment in an ordinary small bottle? She twisted the cap and handed it to her nose to smell it. The faint fragrance was refreshing and very nice. Xiao Jinyan knew that his father disliked him disturbing his and his mother's world of 2, so he didn't plan to stay for long. "I'll take my leave." The emperor didn't say anything on the surface, but he almost drove him away in his heart. Go away quickly, don't disturb me and the queen's time alone." Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyebrows and nodded and left. After Xiao Jinyan left, the queen took the ointment and said to the emperor, "I will apply some ointment for the emperor to see how it works." The emperor nodded readily, "Okay." The queen put the ointment on the cabinet and reached out to untie the emperor's clothes. They have been married for so many years, so they don't feel embarrassed. It's just that they haven't been intimate for a long time, so it's a bit awkward. Thinking that the dog emperor's injury was caused by saving her, she didn't think much about it. After untying her clothes, she untied the bandage. The blood and flesh were still visible where the snake had bitten her. She picked up the small white bottle, opened the bottle cap, and sprinkled the powder on the wound. The emperor looked at the queen's actions, gentle and cautious, and felt like he had returned to his youth, especially warm. "Queen, I remember when you first entered the palace, I was injured while practicing riding and shooting, and you also applied ointment to me so gently." The queen's eyes paused when she heard it. After the emperor mentioned this, she also remembered her youth. At that time, the dog emperor was still the prince, and she didn't know that much. She was really happy at that time. These are all things from our youth, why did the emperor suddenly bring them up? When I first became the crown prince, I didn't have so many concerns and didn't have so many things to do. At that time, the queen would always come to the study to find me, bring me delicious food, and want me to go out with you. The emperor said, looking up at the queen, "I miss my youth very much, and I also miss the queen always coming to me." The queen stopped bandaging her hand and looked at the emperor in confusion, not understanding why he suddenly brought up this matter today. So many years have passed, so long that she thought those things in her youth didn't exist, like a dream. When she first became the crown princess, she was really bold and a little willful. Xiao Qi was busy in the study all day, and she would often go to him. After so many times, he got a little annoyed. That time, her tone was a little heavier, and she realized that Xiao Qi didn't like her always going to the study. Since then, she rarely went there. When she was bored, she practiced sword. Later, Xiao Qi wanted to visit another woman, and she also quarreled and made a scene. On the day when she was scolded by her mother, Xiao Qi went to another woman. That night, she did not sleep all night. When Xiao Qi found out, he comforted her and said that he had no choice but to wait until he became the emperor. She believed it. When she was pregnant, Xiao Qi was very happy and said that he was going to be a father. But she had been pregnant for less than 2 months, but she had an unexpected miscarriage. When Xiao Qi found out, he was very distressed and angry, and comforted her to take care of her body and have children again. But Xiao Qi became more and more fond of concubine Su. When she was pregnant, she always saw her happy and proud look. Many people said behind her back that she was the crown princess, so what? She could not keep the child or the crown prince. She thought that Xiao Qi would get better after he became the emperor. But later, Xiao Qi became the emperor, and in order to fill the harem, he held a large-scale selection. So many beauties gathered together, and the girls who were only 14 or 15 years old were as beautiful as flowers. She found that Xiao Qi cared less about her after he became the emperor. It was not until she became pregnant that Xiao Qi smiled and treated her well. She thought Xiao Qi would only care about her as before, but later she found that the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards were not lacking in beauties. She also had a temper, and Xiao Qi would coax her, but he would still favor other women. Her mother often warned her that she should be generous as a queen, and that concubines who helped the royal family to expand would be meritorious officials. Later, she became a queen in a proper manner, and she could never go back. Now Xiao Qi said that he missed the unreasonable self at that time. Isn't it ridiculous? I was young and ignorant at that time, and I often made unreasonable troubles, which is why I always disturbed the emperor, made him embarrassed everywhere, and made my mother unhappy. Over the years, I have learned to be a princess and a qualified queen, so that my mother and the emperor can't find fault with me. Your Majesty knows how much I have paid to achieve what I have now. Why would your Majesty miss me at that time? Miss the unreasonable concubine. The emperor was stunned when he heard this, and then he sighed again. In this palace, if the queen doesn't learn to adapt, she will suffer a lot. The queen felt very uncomfortable. She had been used to it for many years and deliberately ignored it, but the dog emperor insisted on bringing up the past, which was no less than tearing open her broken heart. She thought that the pain would no longer hurt when she was numb, but when it was mentioned again, she found that it still hurt. Your Majesty also thinks that I used to be unreasonable and inflexible, but I have learned it. Not only have I learned it, but I have also done it very well. I will not cause trouble to your Majesty anymore. Shouldn't your Majesty be happy? The emperor said, I am happy, but I am not happy about whether the queen is qualified, but that I can still stand shoulder to shoulder with the queen, have 2 sons, and even have grandchildren. The queen snorted, even without me, your Majesty will have many children and grandchildren. If concubine Su is still here, your Majesty will have more children and grandchildren. When concubine Su was mentioned, the emperor's face immediately darkened. Why did you mention concubine Su? When the emperor suddenly got angry, the queen knew that her words had touched the dog emperor's sore spot. Concubine Su had a miscarriage in her first pregnancy, and she still had a miscarriage in her second pregnancy. Since then, concubine Su could no longer get pregnant. But the dog emperor was so distressed that he rewarded concubine Su with all kinds of treasures every few days to coax her. It was my fault that I made the emperor sad. The emperor could not help but emphasize, I am not sad. The queen. If you are not sad, why are you angry? What are you angry about? The emperor sighed and said, if I could do it again, I still like the queen before. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 434. The emperor sighed again after he finished speaking. Even if he did it again, there were still some things he couldn't control. Sometimes people are just too greedy and want to have everything. The more they do this, the less they get. When the queen heard the 2 do it again, she suddenly remembered a question Yechu had asked her. If she could choose again, would she still choose to enter the palace? She didn't know the answer to this question after so many years. Your Majesty is really a joke. If your Majesty really liked the concubine before, why did you train me to be like this now? After the queen finished speaking, she continued to bandage her hands. After bandaging, she began to help the emperor tidy up his clothes. After putting them on, she covered him with a quilt. The emperor grabbed the queen's hand. Queen. The queen looked at the dog emperor. Does the emperor have anything else to do? The emperor stared at the queen for a long time before asking, do you believe me? The queen was stunned when she heard the words. Seeing the dog emperor showing such a serious expression, it seemed as if she had returned to her 15th birthday when Xiao Qi personally came to her house to give her a birthday gift. It was also that day that Xiao Qi asked her if she was willing to marry him. Ask her if she is willing to believe her and will treat her consistently. More than 20 years have passed, and she also understands the meaning of consistent, which is probably that she will be the queen and will always be the queen. She retracted her thoughts and said in a calm tone, "What does the emperor want me to believe?" The emperor's eyes were firm, and he said word by word, just like before, always the same. The queen smiled bitterly. "I understand that the emperor promised me that I would be the crown princess and the future queen, and it will always be like this." After the queen finished speaking, she took a deep breath. "The emperor is injured, so you should rest well, and I will not disturb you." The emperor grabbed the queen's hand again, and said in a tone that was almost pleading, "Queen, don't go." Since the queen came back from Fouillage, his relationship with the queen has been in a stalemate and coldness. Today, it was not easy to ease a little. How could he bear to let her go? The queen asked, "Does the emperor have any other instructions?" The emperor said in a gentle voice, "Queen, sit down and talk to me." The queen: "If I continue to talk, I will get a heart attack. I am sick if I talk about anything else. The emperor is injured, and resting well is the most important thing." The emperor sighed. "The queen has been indifferent and distant to me, how can I rest assured to recover?" The queen: "How dare I be indifferent and distant to the emperor? I have been taking care of the emperor these 2 days." The emperor felt a little wronged. The queen said she didn't dare, "But you have been cold to me since you came back from Fouillage. How can a couple sleep in separate beds for more than half a year?" The queen thought about it and realized that she and the dog emperor had not had sex for a long time. She didn't feel anything, but the dog emperor felt a little wronged. "I am old, not as good as a young girl. The queen has 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, so why should she care about these?" The emperor was not stupid, and knew that the queen was looking for reasons and excuses to avoid him. "What is so good about Yechu? What makes you so obsessed with him?" The queen was stunned when she heard the words, and looked at the dog emperor's serious face. Suddenly, she realized that the dog emperor thought he was like this because of Yechu. "You are the ruler of a country, the supreme ruler, but you have a brain problem and you can imagine such a thing. Your Majesty, I think you are not sober enough, you'd better take a rest." The queen pulled back her hand and turned to leave, lest she would have a heart attack if she continued talking. The emperor saw that the queen was leaving, so he opened the quilt and got out of bed to chase her. "Queen, I am very sober." The queen just walked to the door and felt something was wrong. She turned around and saw the dog emperor standing behind her. She looked down and found that he didn't even wear shoes. "Your Majesty, what do you want to do?" The emperor sighed today, but he couldn't help it. "The queen has been like this, I can't rest assured to recover." The queen had no choice but to help the dog emperor back to bed. If the old injury was not healed and he was infected with cold, it would be bad. The emperor held the queen's hand and didn't let her go. If he didn't solve this matter, it would be like a thorn between him and the queen, making both of them very uncomfortable. "Queen, what have I done wrong? Tell me, can't I change it?" Who would have thought that the king of a country would say this? The queen suddenly asked, "I remember asking the emperor before, if I were not the general's daughter, would you still marry me?" The emperor couldn't help but sigh again. Why does the queen ask such a non-existent question? "I admit that in order to consolidate my position as the crown prince, I deliberately investigated General Chang's daughter Chang Wenling. It was because I had such thoughts that I had the opportunity to meet you and think about marrying you as the crown princess." The queen listened to the emperor's frank words. Although she knew it in her heart, she still couldn't help feeling distressed. It was indeed because of the identity of General Chang's daughter. In the eyes of the emperor, it doesn't matter who he marries. What's important is that she is General Chang's daughter. If I were a girl from an ordinary family, the emperor would definitely not marry me. The emperor stretched out his arms and hugged the queen into his arms, ignoring her struggles and holding her tightly. "Queen, why do you always worry about this? If you were a girl from an ordinary family, with no status or background, and not even the qualifications for the selection, would I have the chance to meet you? How can I marry you if I don't even have the chance to meet you? The queen was stunned when she heard this. What the dog emperor said seemed to make some sense. But it still couldn't cover up the fact that he wanted to marry her because of her status. The emperor continued to explain, "Queen, don't worry about these issues, okay? I marry you not only because of your identity, do you understand? None of this is important anymore. It is the emperor's right to marry whomever he wants, and his concubines have no right to interfere." The queen looked at the dog emperor who was holding on to her, but did not dare to really struggle, fearing that his wound would open. The emperor said, "The queen always ignores me because of this matter. Of course it is important. Queen. There are many reasons for me to ignore it." The emperor whispered into the queen's ear, "Ling-er, please don't ignore me, okay? Queen, your majesty, don't worry, I don't dare." The emperor chuckled, "Ling-er, you are so brave, even I dare to beat you." When the queen heard this, she suddenly remembered something. She pushed the dog emperor away and asked, "When the emperor dealt with the python 2 days ago, he was very powerful in martial arts. He didn't look like he didn't know martial arts at all. How did he get raped by my concubine in the first place, beat him down? Now when I think about the time when the emperor held a sword and fought a snake, his martial arts, although not super powerful, was much better than hers." The emperor did not expect that after pretending for so many years, he would be discovered by the queen at this time. "Of course I let you do it. Who can you beat with your fancy moves?" The queen's face turned green. It seems that the dog emperor has been playing tricks on her for all these years. And the first time, she beat the dog emperor as a gangster. It's okay to pretend, but she even pretended to beg for mercy. Later, when she encountered something, she said to him, "I know Kung Fu, I will protect you in the future." It sounds like a joke. The emperor saw that the queen's face was not good, and she was obviously angry. He hurriedly comforted her, "Ling-er, don't be angry, I didn't mean to lie to you." The queen snorted, "The emperor is really worthy of being the king of a country. He hides it well. Is it fun to play tricks on me? How could I play tricks on you? The emperor not only hides it well, but also speaks sweet words." The queen became more and more angry. If she had known that he was pretending, she should have beaten him up at that time. "Ling-er." The emperor reached out to hug the queen. How could the queen, who was angry, let it go as she wished? She pushed him away directly, stood up, and wanted to leave. Hearing a muffled groan from behind, the queen stopped and turned around to see the dog emperor covering his arm with a frown, as if in pain. Thinking of the force she had just pushed, could it be that the wound had split open? Thinking of this possibility, the queen returned to the bed, opened the emperor's clothes, and saw that blood had seeped out of the white bandage. "Your Majesty, can't you just take a good rest? Now it's good, the wound has split open again." The queen untied the bandage while speaking, and saw that the wound had split open. She stood up and took a new bandage, sprinkled some of the powder sent by the prince on it, and then bandaged it again. The emperor looked down at the queen bandaging her wound, not caring about the wound splitting. He looked up at the queen, "Ling-er, can't we talk it out?" While bandaging the wound, the queen said, "I don't know what the emperor wants to say. Bringing up the past is just rubbing salt into the wound. Why bother?" It was the first time the emperor heard the words "rubbing salt into the wound" from the queen's mouth. He grabbed the queen's hand and asked, "Ling-er, didn't you volunteer to enter the palace?" The queen did not answer the emperor's question, but asked back, "Your Majesty, you love concubine Su so much, why don't you let her be the crown princess? The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 435. When it comes to concubine Su, The emperor's face darkened again, because the first child he and Linger had was killed by concubine Su. Linger seemed to have a miscarriage due to an accidental fall, but in fact, it was because concubine Su had someone smear oil on the road where Linger often passed by, which caused the fall and miscarriage. At that time, because of his concern for the Su family, he could not deal with concubine Su, fearing that it would cause dissatisfaction in the Su family, so he endured it. Concubine Su wanted to be the most favored in the harem, so I gave it to her. After concubine Su was favored, she began to be spoiled. What means could the women in the palace not use to compete for favor? When concubine Su was 2 months pregnant for the first time, he had someone smear oil on the ground, and he also let concubine Su experience the pain that Linger suffered when she had a miscarriage. The second pregnancy was caused by another concubine who gave her medicine, and he knew that he just turned a blind eye. Seeing concubine Su's painful appearance, he still didn't get rid of his hatred, so he simply made her unable to get pregnant. Concubine Su has been taking medicine to recuperate because of her miscarriage. The medicine she drinks every day contains chronic poison. It's too good for her to die. These shady means can't be told to the queen. Besides, how can he marry concubine Su as the crown princess if he doesn't like her? The emperor said, "Of course I have my reasons. Why do you always mention concubine Su?" The queen saw that the dog emperor didn't answer and changed the subject. She asked back, "Then why does the emperor always mention the past?" The emperor explained in a gentle voice, "I just want you to be the same as before." The queen heard this sentence the most today. She also wanted to be the same as before. She was beautiful before, much better than now. But she couldn't go back. The emperor always wants others to be like this. Why doesn't he ask himself if he can be the same as before? Only the queen can talk back to the emperor like this. The emperor said word by word, "I have never changed." The queen was too lazy to argue with the dog emperor. What's the point of saying more? Nothing can be changed. Instead, it will only add to the trouble. "Your Majesty, please take a rest first." The emperor held the queen's hand tightly. "You haven't answered my question yet." The queen couldn't help rolling her eyes. "Why did I enter the palace? Shouldn't your Majesty know better?" The emperor carefully recalled that he had expressed his feelings on her birthday, and she was willing, so he would come to ask for marriage in person. It also shows that she entered the palace voluntarily. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the queen. "But I don't understand, why did you treat me so coldly after meeting Yechu? What's so good about that Yechu? You still have the face to covet my woman." The queen was so angry that she almost couldn't breathe. After all, she still didn't believe that she and Yechu were innocent. "I am not only the mother of a country, but also the legitimate daughter of General Chang. I can't do anything out of line whether the emperor believes it or not. I will not explain it again in the future. In fact, it is not important whether the emperor has me by his side. What is important is that there is someone suitable to be the queen." Why does the emperor always worry about this matter? The emperor's tone can't help but rise. "Who said it's not important?" The queen refuted unceremoniously. "Why does the emperor have to slap himself in the face? When the prince chose the princess, what did the emperor say? I don't need to say it again, right? I was just born better than the princess. If I was the same as the princess, I would not be the queen of Daxia now." The emperor held his forehead, turned around and came back. He didn't understand why the queen always kept harping on his identity. The queen looked at the emperor's silence and knew that he had nothing to refute. After staying in the palace for more than 20 years, what didn't he see through? The royal family valued interests, and most of the concubines in the palace were daughters of ministers in the court. Fortunately, she didn't give birth to a daughter, otherwise she might become a bargaining chip for political marriage in the future. The queen was too lazy to say anything more. She urgently needed to go out and get some fresh air. "Your Majesty, take a rest first. I'll go and see if the medicine is ready." The queen stood up and took a few steps, and then she heard the emperor say, "Do you think that the candidate for the crown princess that your father and mother chose was you?" The emperor didn't want to mention this matter. He always thought that Linger understood, but after all these things, he found that Linger had been entangled in the issue of identity. Identity is innate, and no one can change it. It is precisely because it cannot be changed that he has the opportunity to meet Chang Wenling. The queen turned to look at the dog emperor and asked puzzledly, "What does the emperor mean by this sentence?" The emperor said faintly, "At first, the candidate for the crown princess was General Su's legitimate daughter." The queen heard it clearly this time. At first, the candidate for the crown princess was concubine Su. How did it become her? The emperor said again, "It was I who insisted on marrying you as the crown princess." The queen was stunned, and seemed a little unbelievable. It was the dog emperor who insisted on her becoming the crown princess? Asterisk. Shen Shuwei lowered her head and watched Xiaobai drinking goat milk. Every time at this time, Xiaobai was extremely well behaved. The appetite was getting bigger and bigger every day, and the weight was obviously increasing. When concubine Su came to play, she saw the cat in front of Shen Shuwei and felt a little curious. "Crown princess, where did the cat come from? It's so big and still feeding milk." People who have never seen a tiger cub usually recognize it slowly. This is a tiger, especially a famous daughter like concubine Su, who has never seen a tiger. Shen Shuwei chuckled twice, "This is a tiger." Xiaobai, who was still drinking milk, held the glass cup tightly with his two claws, fearing that someone would come to steal its food. When concubine Su heard about the tiger, she took several steps back in fright. She looked at the cat-like tiger in Shen Shuwei's arms with a horrified expression. "Princess, why are you holding the tiger in your arms? Be careful, it bites you." When Shen Shuwei saw concubine Su being so frightened, she couldn't help laughing. "Don't worry, she's still young and hasn't been weaned yet." Concubine Su was still very scared. She had heard of tigers eating people. But it will grow up, and it will eat people when it grows up. Shen Shuwei looked down at Xiaobai and reached out to touch its furry head. Xiaobai doesn't know how to do it. He will protect his master very much. Concubine Su cautiously came to Shen Shuwei's side and looked at the little tiger who was drinking milk, not to mention that she really didn't listen. Really or not? Tigers are very ferocious, how can they listen to people? You are not an animal tamer. Shen Shuwei still knew about the beast tamer. In fact, taming animals was very cruel to the beasts. She did not need to rely on those methods to make the beasts obey. When have I ever lied to you? Look at it, isn't it cute? Concubine Su looked at the little tiger holding the glass cup tightly with its two paws, its light blue eyes looking at her from time to time, very vigilant. It's cute, but it's a tiger that can eat people. This cannot be changed. Shen Shuwei saw that concubine Su didn't believe it, so she didn't explain too much. You will know later. Xiaobai finished drinking the milk, licked his mouth, then climbed up Shen Shuwei's legs, trying to get into her arms. Xiaobai put his two forelimbs on Shen Shuwei's legs, and just about to push his limbs up, he fell down and rolled twice. He reluctantly climbed to the side of Shen Shuwei's retreat, stretched out his forelimbs, and wanted to go up. All of them were surprised. Roll down. Concubine Su looked at the little tiger's movements and couldn't help laughing. What is the little tiger doing? You want to come on my lap? Shen Shuwei reached out and touched Xiaobai's forehead. Go and play with the snowballs. Xiaobai raised his soft head and stared at Shen Shuwei for a while, then turned to look at Xuetuan. Xuetuan. Little brat, don't bother me. When Xiaobai saw Sichuan, he ran over with his short legs and bumped his legs, rubbed his head against Sichuan's head as if to please, and even licked Sichuan's face. Xuetuan impatiently stretched out a paw and slapped Xiaobai away. How annoying! How strong is the snowball? This claw directly caused Xiaobai's soft body to roll 3 times before stopping. After Xiaobai stopped, he quickly got up, ran back with a bang, and continued to lick Xue Tuan's face as if to please him. Xue Tuan stretched out a paw and slapped Xiaobai away again. Xiaobai's soft body rolled around a few times, then ran back again, this time licking the snowball's face harder. The snowball that was licked with drool on his face had a look of despair on his face. Shen Chuwei and concubine Su couldn't help laughing when they saw the interaction between the cat and the tiger. Xue Tuan actually dares to slap the tiger. When the tiger grows up, it can slap you away with one claw. Let's see if you are afraid, concubine Su laughed again after saying this. Shen Chuwei explained, even if Xiaobai grows up, he won't dare to attack Xue Tuan. Concubine Su asked doubtfully, why? Shen Chuwei explained, because in Xiaobai's eyes, Sichuan is the elder. No matter how powerful the younger generation is, they must respect their elders. Concubine Su looked surprised, that's it, I've gained more knowledge. Xiaobai was tired from playing, so he lay down next to Xue Tuan and fell asleep. Sichuan looked at Xiaobai who was sleeping next to him, with 3 words written in his eyes, I'm so annoyed. When night fell, concubine Su was lying on the bed, looking at the little bell in her hand. Ever since the man in black gave her the bell, she couldn't help but hold it in her hand and look at it. I wonder if the man in black is still in the royal enclosure? After waiting for a long time, the little bell was quiet. When she was about to close her eyes and sleep, the little bell suddenly chirped twice and beat several times at the same time. Concubine Su opened her eyes suddenly and saw the little bell on the bedside making a crisp sound. The man in black was looking for her. Concubine Su was so excited that she opened the quilt to get dressed, then put on her shoes and ran out. Outside, torches illuminated the surroundings of the camp, and patrolling guards were vaguely visible. She held up her skirt and walked around the tent, running towards the woods behind. Wei Qi had been secretly watching concubine Su. When he saw concubine Su running out of the tent, he followed her from a distance. Seeing concubine Su meeting the man in black from a distance, he did not go forward to arrest the man, but went back to report to his master. Shen Chuwei looked at the scene of Xiaobai trying to please Xue Tuan but being rejected, and suddenly smelled the aroma of barbecue. Smelling the fragrance, she turned to look at the camp door and saw Xiao Jinyan walking over with 2 roasted wild pigeons. Your Highness, when did you catch the wild pigeon? In the afternoon. This is just baked by Chengzi. You can try it. Xiao Jinyan placed 2 roasted wild pigeons in front of her. The roasted wild pigeon is still steaming, and you can tell it has just been roasted. At this time, Wei Kai's voice came from outside the door, Master, I have something to report. When Xiao Jinyan heard Wei Kai's voice, he guessed what was going on. He said to Shen Chuwei, you eat first while I go out to take care of things. Yes, Shen Chu nodded slightly, but kept staring at the roasted wild pigeon. Xiao Jinyan looked away helplessly, stood up, and walked out. When he came out, he saw Wei Qi outside the camp. When he was far away, Xiao Jinyan asked coldly, what's the matter? My subordinates just saw concubine Su coming out of the camp to meet the man in black. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 436. Wei Qi lowered his eyebrows and nodded in report. A sharp look flashed in Xiao Jinyan's eyes, go over and have a look. Wei Qi took the order and followed Xiao Jinyan to concubine Su's camp. In the woods at this time, concubine Su was pulled behind a tree as soon as she walked in. This time she was much calmer than before. What are you doing here? The man in black said straight to the point, I want you to help me ask the crown princess about Feng Wu. Concubine Su said, The crown princess doesn't know Feng Wu. The man in black asked doubtfully, how do you know? Concubine Su said, the crown princess asked me before if I knew Feng Wu. If the crown princess knew, would she still come and ask me? The man in black frowned when he heard this. He had no hope at first, but he was still a little disappointed when he got this answer. Concubine Su couldn't help but ask again, who is Feng Wu? What makes you look for him for so long? Seeing how curious she was, the man in black didn't intend to hide it anymore. Feng Wu is my sister. She is actually a sister, not a sweetheart. Concubine Su felt a little happy. My sister is doing well. I've searched almost all over Daxia, but I still can't find her. The man in black was a little sad. He had been looking for her for too long and was disappointed again and again, leaving him unsure of what to do. Concubine Su heard the anxiety in the man in black's tone, and she comforted him, don't worry, you will definitely find him. The man in black sighed, I've been looking for you for 8 years. How easy is it? Although Concubine Su had never lost a sister, she could understand how anxious and desperate she would be after her sister had been missing for 8 years. Did your sister run away from home? The man in black nodded, yeah. Why did you run away from home? Didn't you treat her badly? Concubine Su believed that only if you treat her badly would you think about running away from home. A person like her who is pampered by the whole family would not think about running away from home. No, the man in black thought of Xiaoju, who was the treasure in the palm of the family's hands. How could he treat her badly? Since you treat her well, why would she run away from home? Concubine Su seemed to have thought of something. Could it be that bad guys abducted her? The man in black fell into deep thought after hearing this. He had never thought that he was taken away. The first thing he thought of was Xiao Jinyan. Xiaoju and Xiao Jinyan were very close at that time. He came to Daxia to look for Xiaoju at the beginning, but did not find Xiaoju. In order not to delay the search for Xiaoju, he went to look elsewhere, fearing that his enemies were deliberately retaliating and kidnapping Xiaoju. Concubine Su asked curiously, how old is your sister now? The man in black said, 1 year younger than you, 18 years old. I heard from my brother that girls abducted by bad guys, especially the pretty ones, may be sold to brothels. As Concubine Su spoke, she realized that she had said the wrong thing. How could she think this way? The man in black's eyes darkened. Concubine Su hurriedly explained, I'm just guessing that your sister must be lucky enough to have good luck, and someone will rescue her if she is in danger. The man in black has been with Concubine Su for 2 years, and he still has some understanding of her temperament. She speaks quickly and offends people easily. You go back first. Concubine Su was a little reluctant to leave. What about you? The man in black said, if Daxia can't find her again, I will leave Daxia. When Concubine Su heard that he was leaving Daxia, she suddenly felt empty. She reached out and grabbed his hand. Then when will you leave Daxia? Will you come to Daxia again in the future? The man in black lowered his head and glanced at the hand held by Concubine Su. Concubine Su also found that she actually grabbed the man's hand, blushed, and took her hand back, explaining hesitantly, I am in a hurry, and I will not grab a man's hand casually. The man in black gave an inaudible smile, I will probably leave Daxia next July, and when I find Xiaoju, I will come to Daxia to play. Concubine Su asked, how long will it take? 2 months? Or half a year? Of course, the sooner the better, the man in black sighed. He wished he could find Xiaoju now. After so many years, the little girl has grown into a big girl. Concubine Su felt a little disappointed when she thought that the man in black was leaving Daxia. When she returned to her tent, she found no one sitting at the table. Xiao Jinyan looked at Concubine Su walking in, looking completely lost. Without saluting him, he asked coldly, Concubine Su, where have you been so late? Concubine Su was startled by a cold voice. She raised her head and saw Xiao Jinyan sitting at the table. Looking at those sharp eyes, she felt guilty again. Why is Xiao Jinyan in his tent? She was stunned for a while, then she came to her senses and stepped forward to say, "Your Highness." Xiao Jinyan slammed the table angrily. Concubine Su is becoming more and more courageous. Man at the night party, do you know your guilt? Concubine Su was just a paper tiger. How could she withstand Xiao Jinyan's fear? Immediately, my legs went weak and I almost fell to the ground. How did Xiao Jinyan know that she went to see the man in black? She couldn't admit it at this time. If Xiao Jinyan thought it would be over if she had an affair with an outsider, she didn't want to leave a bad reputation before leaving the palace. Your Highness, I don't know what you are talking about. Xiao Jinyan snorted secretly. Do you still know that fornication has a bad reputation? Concubine Su, as my concubine, you have a private meeting with a man in the middle of the night. If this matter is spread out, not only will your reputation be in danger, but your life may also be in danger. If Concubine Su tells the truth, I can still care about Su. The general's face was spared. Concubine Su felt very upset. She didn't know how Xiao Jinyan knew that she had met the man in black. She hadn't done anything yet, but she was accused of having an affair. It was so unfair. Your Highness, it's not midnight now. Besides, I was just meeting a friend. My uterocele is still there. Your Highness can't wrongly accuse me. Xiao Jinyan was so angry that she laughed. She had been following Xiaoju for so long, and even their words were similar. She even knew how to refute. This is the royal enclosure. Outsiders are not allowed to enter. Those who disobey the order will be killed without mercy. You said he is your friend, why are you wearing night clothes? Why don't you show up openly? It is because this is the royal enclosure that he, an outsider, dares not show up. Besides, although he is wearing night clothes, he is not a bad person. He saved my life. If it weren't for him, I would have died long ago. As Concubine Su said this, she thought of Xiao Jinyan's identity and begged, he is really not a bad person. Your Highness is generous, so don't worry about it. Xiao Jinyan. Then do you know who the man in black is? Where is he from? Concubine Su shook her head, I don't know, I don't even know his name. After Concubine Su finished speaking, she began to regret it. The man in black was about to leave Daxia, and she forgot to ask his name tonight. I don't know when we will see each other again. Concubine Su was unhappy the more she thought about it. Xiao Jinyan. Judging from what Concubine Su said in her heart, she was not lying. She didn't even know who the other party was, and she still called him a friend. This brain. Then do you know why the man in black came to Daxia? Concubine Su hesitated after hearing this. Can't tell that the man in black came to Daxia to find Feng Wu? It should be impossible to tell. Concubine Su shook her head, I don't know. Xiao Jinyan snorted coldly, but didn't care that Concubine Su lied, because he could read minds and knew that the man in black came to Daxia to find Feng Wu. He had Feng Wu's portrait and jade, maybe he knew her before, but he just forgot. Concubine Su was a little worried and thought about leaving the palace, so she just brought it up, Your Highness, I want to leave the palace, and I can save you some money. Xiao Jinyan had already known from Concubine Su's inner thoughts that she wanted to leave the palace, so she was not surprised. I will give you a decent reason to leave the palace. Concubine Su thought it would take some time to talk, but she didn't expect Xiao Jinyan to agree so readily. Yes, staying is just one more mouth to feed. She bowed, thank you, Your Highness. Before leaving the palace, you should pay attention to some etiquette and rules. Xiao Jinyan left after saying this. Concubine Su took off her clothes and lay on the bed. She was so sad when she thought that the man in black was leaving Daxia. Xiao Jinyan returned to the tent and saw Shen Chuwei lying on the bed and asleep. After taking off his clothes and getting on the bed, he lit the oil lamp and looked at Xiaoju sleeping. His eyebrows and eyes were still somewhat similar to the portrait. Could the man in black come to Daxia to find Fengwu because he found that Xiaoju was similar to Fengwu? Recalling the sudden attack of the man in black 2 days ago, Xiaoju was afraid that he would be bullied and stepped forward to help. He actually blocked the hand of the man in black, swinging the sword with one hand. After fighting with the man in black for several rounds, he knew better than anyone how high the man in black's martial arts was. Xiaoju could not stop him at full strength unless the man in black withdrew his strength. Recalling the time when the sword was swung over, because of Xiaoju's approach, he could feel that the strength was indeed reduced by half. Looking at the black-clothed man's attitude towards Xiaoju, it can be guessed that this was not the first time the black-clothed man had seen her. Xiao Jinyan pondered for a long time, vaguely feeling that the memory he had lost was very important. The next day, he sent people to continue investigating Fengwu. Shen Shuwei came out of the tent and saw the queen leading the horse from a distance. She walked over and bowed, "May your mother be blessed with good health." The queen turned around and found that it was the crown princess. She smiled and said, "It's the crown princess." Shen Shuwei saw the dark circles under the queen's eyes and asked with some concern, "Did your mother not rest well last night?" The queen paused after hearing this. She did not sleep well last night, and did not want to worry the crown princess, so she said, "Well, there were a lot of mosquitoes last night." Shen Shuwei said, "I have mosquito repellent here, the effect is very good, I will send some to your mother later." The queen did not refuse, and nodded gently, "Okay." The emperor waited in the tent for a long time and saw that the queen did not come back. From last night to now, they did not say a few words, and he did not know what she was thinking. The emperor put on his clothes and walked out of the tent himself. He saw the queen and the crown princess chatting from a distance and walked over. Shen Shuwei saw the emperor coming and bowed, "Father, may you be blessed with good health." The emperor glanced at the crown princess and then at the queen. She was wearing riding clothes and holding a horse in her hand, as if she was going hunting. "Does the queen want to go riding?" The queen said, "Your Majesty, I have nothing to do, so I want to ride a horse." Hearing this, the emperor reached out and held her hand holding the reins, and said softly, "I will go with you." The queen politely refused, "The emperor is still injured. What if the wound opens again while riding a horse?" Shen Shuwei noticed that the wound opened again. The emperor's wound had opened before? The emperor said indifferently, "It's just riding a horse. It's okay. I haven't galloped with the queen for a long time. I will experience it again today." Shen Shuwei felt like a super big light bulb. While the two were talking, she found an excuse and slipped away. After Shen Shuwei left, the emperor couldn't help but ask, "Queen, you still don't want to believe me?" The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 437. The queen held the reins tightly in her hand and looked at the dog emperor's pale face, which might be due to the wound that split open yesterday. It didn't matter to her whether she believed it or not. So what if the dog emperor wanted to marry her as the crown princess? At that time, the power of the Chang family was stronger than that of the Su family, so it was not difficult to marry her as the crown princess. The queen mother had always disliked her. If she had the same status as Shen Shuwei, even if the dog emperor insisted, it would not change. "Your Majesty, these are not important anymore. I am not an unreasonable person. I have been the queen for so many years, and I am not in vain." The emperor thought that if he explained that he insisted on marrying her as the crown princess, the queen would understand, but the queen still didn't understand and continued to treat him lukewarmly. "Why is it not important? You are indifferent to me, isn't this serious?" The queen looked at the dog emperor who was gradually losing control. She was not angry yet, but he was angry. It was obviously her who was wronged. Isn't it good that the emperor and the empress treat each other with respect? The emperor couldn't help but raise his voice and said, "What I want is for the emperor and the empress to live in harmony, not to treat each other with respect like guests." The queen cursed secretly when she heard this, saying that the dog emperor was shameless. He had a bunch of women, but he still asked her to live in harmony with him. In my eyes, harmony is a loving couple with deep feelings. The emperor has 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, and countless beauties. It is not appropriate to describe the emperor and the empress as harmony, not as respectful as guests. The emperor was stunned. "I haven't ridden a horse properly since I came to the royal enclosure. Your Majesty, go back and rest first." "I will be back soon." The queen retracted her sight, tightened the reins in her hand again, stepped on the stirrups and got on the horse neatly. She squeezed the horse's belly and the horse ran out. "It has been too long since I rode a horse like this. It feels strange and familiar. The horses in the enclosure still retain their wildness. They run very fast. The wind whistles past my ears, which is indescribably refreshing." The emperor stood there and watched the queen riding away, as if he was back to his youth. In fact, the queen had not changed. She was still very courageous. In front of him, she dared to say what others dared not say, and did not want to perfunctorily do things she was unwilling to do. Who in the palace could speak to me in this tone like her? The emperor watched the queen's back getting farther and farther away. He asked someone to bring a horse. When he was about to get on, his subordinate whispered to remind him, "Your Majesty, you are injured and it is not suitable to ride a horse." "When did I need you to remind me?" the emperor said coldly, holding the reins tightly, mounted the horse neatly and chased after him. Shen Shuwei watched the emperor and the queen from a distance. Even if he didn't hear what they were saying, he could guess that they were having a quarrel. The queen rode alone, and the emperor chased. The emperor was still injured. When Shen Shuwei was wondering, a low voice came from above his head. "What are you doing?" Xiao Jinyan found that Xiao Ju was not in the tent. He came out to look for her and saw her standing behind the tree. Shen Shuwei raised her head guiltily and saw Xiao Jinyan's handsome face, his phoenix eyes staring at her. "Your Highness, are your father and mother having a quarrel?" Xiao Jinyan did not answer but asked, "How do you know?" Shen Shuwei told Xiao Jinyan what she had just seen. "I saw that my mother was not in good spirits today, and she had dark circles under her eyes." Xiao Jinyan looked up and saw her father's back as he walked away. "There has been a problem between them for a long time." Shen Shuwei asked in confusion, "What is the problem?" Xiao Jinyan looked at her delicate face with a puzzled expression, and he chuckled, "If I have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards and favor other concubines, how would you feel?" Shen Shuwei frowned when she heard it, and then snorted, "Then I will pack up my bedding and leave. If I'm lucky, I might meet a first-time married young man and marry him with 2 children." Xiao Jinyan's face darkened. "Find a young man? You can't say that. Your Highness has 3 palaces, 6 courtyards, and 72 concubines. What's wrong with my concubine divorcing her husband and marrying again? Don't think that your Highness has misophobia." "I also have misophobia." Shen Shuwei raised her chin and said it with confidence. Xiao Jinyan was so angry that she laughed. She raised her hand and knocked her forehead. "I was just making an analogy." Shen Shuwei said, "I was also making an analogy. There is a sequence. If your Highness behaves well, I will behave well too." Xiao Jinyan. "I just want you to stand in the perspective of the Queen Mother and feel how the Queen Mother quarreled with the Emperor Father. Don't go off topic." Shen Shuwei said, "Oh. You still want to find a good husband to marry? Have you been thinking about this since early on?" Xiao Jinyan remembered that she was unwilling to sleep with him at the beginning, so she must have had this idea. Shen Shuwei said, "I dare not. No matter what, that is something you can only think about after leaving the palace." "Didn't I leave the palace?" Xiao Jinyan's face turned green when she heard this. Sure enough, she had a plan from the beginning. Thinking of concubine Su, she was distracted because the man in black was leaving Daxia. It was most likely that she had something to do with the man in black. Looking at Shen Shuwei again, fortunately he was very aware at the beginning and took action when he saw the opportunity. If it was too late, he might have been kidnapped by someone. Shen Shuwei said helplessly, I was originally leaving the palace, but who would have thought that I would be intercepted by your highness halfway? But it doesn't matter, it won't affect my continued eating and drinking. Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei said again, my father has so many women, it is understandable that my mother is unhappy. If my father and your highness are as chaste as he is, my father and mother will definitely be able to live in harmony. Xiao Jinyan said, father has his own concerns and considerations. If father and mother talk it out, maybe the relationship will ease a little. Shen Shuwei snorted, no matter how much father has his own difficulties, it makes mother sad. Xiao Jinyan did not comment. Shen Shuwei then said, your highness, don't learn from father. Xiao Jinyan couldn't help but emphasize his tone and said, I am different from father. Shen Shuwei then showed a satisfied smile. Today is a good day. The Queen Mother left the Sinning Palace with the help of Nanny Yu and went to the Imperial Garden slowly. After playing with Susu for a while, the Queen Mother felt that Susu was also very likable. So she asked someone to bring Dao Tao and Susu to play for a while to relieve boredom. Yun Gaifei learned early in the morning that the Queen Mother was going to play with the prince's children in the Imperial Garden, so she took Yin'er to the Imperial Garden as well, with the purpose of letting the Queen Mother see this great-grandson. Since the Crown Princess gave birth to twins, the Emperor has never looked at Yin'er again. Yin'er is now 6 years old. If he doesn't attract attention, his future may be hopeless. When they came, the two nurses carried Dao Tao and Susu to the pavilion in advance. Concubine Yun took Yin'er and pretended to pass by chance, and walked in with a smile. The Crown Prince's grandson and daughter are so big. The nurses saw Concubine Yun and bowed, Concubine Yun. Concubine Yun pulled Yin'er to Dao Tao and Susu, Yin'er, this is my brother and sister. Before Concubine Yun finished speaking, Yin'er impatiently broke free of her hand, Grandma, I want to play. Concubine Yun loved her grandson and didn't force it. She wanted to wait for the Queen Mother to come, and then let Yin'er and Dao Tao and Susu play. The peachwood swords in Yin'er's hands stabbed and chopped at Chu Lingfeng. The sharp peachwood swords poked his body, and he frowned in pain. Seeing that he didn't cooperate, Yin'er went up and pushed him. You have been killed by me, fall down quickly. Chu Lingfeng looked at Yin'er with his dark eyes coldly, his posture straight, as if he didn't hear Yin'er's words. Yin'er threw away the wooden sword and ran back crying to complain, Grandma, he doesn't listen to me. Concubine Yun hugged her grandson distressedly, looking at Chu Lingfeng, who was 8 years old and couldn't say 2 words all day long. I don't know how King Chu Nan taught him, and he didn't know any rules. As Yin'er's companion, you should listen to him, but you don't know any rules. Yin'er cried and said, Grandma, I don't want him to be my companion, I hate him. Concubine Yun was so distressed to see her grandson crying like this, and wiped her precious grandson's tears with a handkerchief. Yin'er, he is your companion arranged by your royal grandfather, you can't give him up. Yin'er became much more honest when he heard the royal grandfather. But he didn't listen to me, I have to be obedient. After hearing this, Concubine Yun looked up at Chu Lingfeng, Prince Chu, kneel down and admit your fault. Chu Lingfeng stubbornly straightened his back, his overly white cheeks were a bit sickly pale, I'm not wrong. Concubine Yun winked at the little eunuch. The little eunuch understood and pressed Chu Lingfeng forward. An 8-year-old child was no match for an adult, and soon he pressed him down to his knees. Susu tilted her head and looked at the scene in front of her, her beautiful big eyes full of curiosity. She walked over with her little hands holding the bench in the pavilion. The nurse saw it and bent over to follow behind, fearing that she would forget that she couldn't walk and fall down because she was having fun. Susu moved her short legs to Chu Lingfeng's side and reached out to grab his arm. Chu Lingfeng looked down at the fleshy little hand on his arm, raised his head and looked at the owner of the hand, a baby. Susu tightly grasped Chu Lingfeng's clothes, and with the other hand, she let go of the chair and grasped Chu Lingfeng's hand, tilting her head and looking at him curiously. Being looked at by a little child, Chu Lingfeng looked at him twice more. Susu grinned and stretched out her hand for a hug, hug, hug. It was the first time that Chu Lingfeng encountered such a situation, and for a moment he didn't know how to react. Dao Tao, who was watching from the side, seriously suspected that her sister had recognized the wrong person, and her brother was here. The Queen Mother saw the scene when she came. "Whose child is this?" Concubine Yun stepped forward and bowed. "Queen Mother, this is the Prince of King Chunan, and now he is Yinner's companion. After he made a mistake, I made him kneel down as punishment." It turned out to be the Prince of Chu. The Queen Mother sat down with the help of Nanny Yu. Concubine Yun pulled Yinner over. "Hurry up and pay your respects to the Queen Mother." Yinner stepped forward and knelt on the ground. Yinner pays his respects to the grandmother. The Queen Mother hadn't seen Yinner for a long time, and found that he had grown up a lot, and almost didn't recognize him. "Yinner is so old now, get up." "Thank you, Grandma." Yinner stood up, came to Chu Lingfeng and said to Susu, "He is not your brother, I am your brother, I will hug you." He then reached out to hug Susu. Susu's hands tightly grasped Chu Lingfeng's clothes, struggling to prevent Yinner from hugging her. Yinner also followed the instructions of Concubine Yun, and in front of Grandma, he had to be a good brother and build a good relationship with Dao Tao and Susu, so when he saw Susu wanted Chu Lingfeng to hold her, he rushed to hug Susu. After the tug, Yinner not only failed to pick up Susu, but also fell to the ground with Susu. Susu fell directly to the ground because she was holding Chu Lingfeng's clothes, and immediately cried out in pain. Chu Lingfeng was stunned when he saw Susu, who was smiling very sweetly just now, crying very sadly now. The nurse stepped forward in time to help Susu up. The Queen Mother felt extremely distressed when she saw it. She turned to look at Yinner and scolded, "If you don't know how to hug, don't pull Susu. Susu is so big, how can she withstand your dragging? The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 438. After the Queen Mother scolded her, she went up to see Susu. "Susu, don't cry. Grandma will give you a cake, okay?" Susu cried so hard that she was out of breath, with tears hanging on her long eyelashes, but her hand kept holding on to Chu Lingfeng's clothes. Chu Lingfeng was only 8 years old. Faced with this situation, he had no choice but to remain silent. Concubine Yun Gaifei helped Yinner up distressedly, but before she could even say a few words of comfort, she was slapped fiercely by the Queen Mother, so she was naturally dissatisfied. She looked at Susu, who was crying non-stop. It was clear that Yinner had fallen. She was just sitting on the ground. She must have cried on purpose to make the Queen Mother blame Yinner. At such a young age, you already know how to pretend to be pitiful. How can you do it when you grow up? Queen Mother, Yinner just likes Susu too much. She keeps saying that Sister Susu is so cute and wants to protect her and play with her. Concubine Yun Gui looked at Chu Lingfeng and deliberately put the blame on him. Yinner was worried that Prince Chu would push Susu down, so he took the initiative to hug her. But Prince Chu deliberately held Susu and held onto her, which led to wrestling. This was not the first time that Chu Lingfeng was wronged. He raised his head and looked at the Queen Mother and explained, "Your Majesty, I did not push her, nor did I hold her on purpose." Concubine Yun gave Chu Lingfeng a hard look and said, "Queen Mother, Prince Chu has lied not once or twice. Last time, he pushed Yinner down. I gave him a few words of reprimand, but he still doesn't have a long memory. Chu Lingfeng lowered her eyes silently after hearing this. Last time Yin'er pushed him intentionally and he fell down. Concubine Yun made him hungry for a day and even got a beating. The Queen Mother glanced at Chu Lingfeng and saw Susu holding Chu Lingfeng's hand tightly. She was crying like this and still holding on. The wet nurse first discovered that Susu had been holding on to Chu Lingfeng's clothes, and it was also because she fell to the ground instead of falling while holding on to the clothes. Queen Mother, Susu is very smart. She knows that she won't fall if she catches Prince Chu. If she hadn't grabbed Prince Chu, she would have definitely fallen on her head just now. Concubine Yun couldn't help but roll her eyes after hearing what the wet nurse said. Wasn't this a slap in the face again? A slave talks so much. The Queen Mother saw Susu crying so sadly, and no matter how old she was, she stretched out her hand to hug Susu. Susu, Grandma hugs her. Susu then let go of Chu Lingfeng's hand and allowed the Queen Mother to hold her. She also stopped crying at this time. The Queen Mother found that she stopped crying while holding Susu, and she immediately felt it was amazing. Seeing the tears still hanging on Susu's pink and tender face was particularly heartbreaking. She looked at Yin'er and saw him glaring at Chu Lingfeng. Yin'er is not allowed to hug Susu again next time. Yin'er curled her lips dissatisfied. Queen Mother, Yin'er made this mistake unintentionally. You won't make the same mistake next time, Concubine Yun said, pushing Yin'er. Yin'er was unhappy at this time, lowering his head and saying nothing. The Queen Mother glanced at Yin'er and said, Yin'er is also 6 years old. He must have learned a lot. How is your handwriting? Concubine Yun Gaifei said as if she was getting a treasure. Back to the Queen Mother, Yin'er is not only good at writing, but also good at poetry and poetry. The Queen Mother said, I married remembers that when the prince was 6 years old, he also wrote good calligraphy. Let the AI family see if the young man is better than the blue man. Concubine Yun Gaifei couldn't wait for this rare opportunity to express herself, so she immediately asked someone to prepare pen, ink, paper, and inkstone. After everything was ready, Concubine Yun Gaifei happily polished it and handed the ink pen to Yin'er's hand. Yin'er, come and write a paragraph for the Queen Mother to read. The Queen Mother frowned as she looked at this scene. Yin'er took a red pen and started writing in a formal manner. After finishing writing, Concubine Yun couldn't wait to take the ink pen from his hand and urged happily, Yin'er, pick it up and show it to the Queen Mother. Yin'er was also obedient, and trotted to the Queen Mother with the words in her hand, and said as if she was offering a treasure, Grandma Huangtai, look at the words written by Yin'er. The Queen Mother lowered her head and looked at the words in Yin'er's hand. Perhaps because of Concubine Yun Gaifei's praise, her expectations were too high, but she was a little disappointed when she saw that the words were far lower than her expectations. The handwriting is okay, but it's still far from what the prince wrote when he was 6 years old. The smile on Concubine Yun's lips froze. She walked over and looked down at Yin'er's handwriting. It was obviously very good and neat, so why was it not as good as the prince's handwriting? The Queen Mother saw the disbelief on Concubine Yun's face, and she said quietly, Concubine Yun, you can go to Wanbao Pavilion and have a look. Even the late emperor was full of praise for the calligraphy written by the prince when he was 6 years old. After saying that, he hugged Susu and walked out of the pavilion. Susu lay on the Queen Mother's shoulder, looking at her little brother who was kneeling on the ground, and kept waving at him with her fleshy little hands. When Chu Lingfeng raised his head, he could see Susu looking at him, but he lowered his head. Because of what happened today, he was hungry again after returning. I don't know when such days will end. Concubine Yun Gaifei was a little unconvinced and took Yin'er to Wanbao Tower. She saw the handwriting written by the prince when he was 6 years old, and then looked at Yin'er's handwriting. She wouldn't know it without comparing it. After comparing it, she could tell it at a glance. Concubine Yun Gaifei was determined to teach her grandson well. Yin'er, Do you want to work hard at practicing calligraphy? Compare them all. Yinner nodded, I understand, Grandma. Later, when Dao Tao was 5 years old, her handwriting was more beautiful than Yinner's handwriting. As for Susu, she is only responsible for eating delicious food and being pampered by a group of people. If Susu writes, the Supreme Emperor will be the first to praise Susu for her good writing. Asterisk. The sun is shining at noon. The queen rode for a long time and came to a cliff. Looking at the waterfall not far away, she suddenly felt relaxed and happy. I haven't ridden a horse for a long time. I feel a little tired after riding for a while, and my thigh hurts. But it's worth it to see such a beautiful scenery. Thinking about entering the palace at the age of 15, I have never had the opportunity to enjoy such a free and unrestrained life. It's not the palace that trapped her, but the emperor followed the queen here from a distance. He tightened the reins and stopped dozens of feet away. His eyes fell on the queen. For a moment, he couldn't bear to disturb her. The intense exercise while riding caused the wound to split again, and it was bleeding at this time. The emperor didn't notice it at all, and his eyes stayed on the red figure in the distance. Just now, he saw the queen galloping wildly on the horse. He knew that the queen should be happy at this time. Nothing can make people more comfortable than galloping wildly on the horse. The queen sat on the horse's back and stared at the waterfall in front of her for a long time. The horse lowered its head to eat grass. Feeling that the time was almost up, she tightened the reins and turned back. As a result, she turned around and saw the dog emperor in the distance, standing there, looking in her direction. I don't know how long the dog emperor has been here. He came and didn't say anything. The queen thought that the dog emperor was still injured, so she drove the horse over. When the emperor saw that the queen was finally willing to turn back, he thought that the queen would wait until the afternoon before going back. Why did the emperor come? Aren't you afraid of the wound splitting? The emperor said, how can I feel at ease if you come out alone? I haven't ridden with you for a long time. Today is my wish. The queen's horsemanship is still good. The queen snorted, the emperor is still injured. If something really happens, I will still need to protect the emperor. The emperor laughed, don't worry, queen, even if I am injured, I will protect the queen and make her safe and sound. Queen, I dare not. The emperor asked, are you feeling much better now? The queen did not deny, it's better. The emperor smiled when he heard it, every year in the future, I will bring you to the autumn hunting. The queen was stunned when she heard it. The autumn hunting was an activity for the princes and ministers, and it had nothing to do with the women in the palace. It was quite unexpected to bring her out this time. She was naturally happy that she could come every year in the future. Why did the emperor suddenly become so nice? The emperor said, just now I saw the queen riding a horse, and I thought of how the queen looked before she entered the palace. It's inevitable that the queen is a little boring in the deep palace, so it's good to come out and get some fresh air. Although the queen is happy that she can come out to stay in the paddock for half a month every year, she can't help feeling a little depressed when she thinks that the dog emperor never thought of taking her out in the past years. She thought she couldn't come, but when she came this time, she found that it was not that she couldn't come, but that it depended on whether the dog emperor allowed it. It's just a matter of a word from the dog emperor. The emperor looked at the queen, who was still happy a few seconds ago, but now she was a little unhappy. He drove the horse closer to the queen. Why, the queen is unhappy. The queen said faintly, I am naturally happy to be able to leave the palace, but the emperor suddenly became so nice, which made the concubine a little flattered. The emperor heard this and pondered for a long time, it's not that I didn't want to take the queen out before, but... The queen couldn't help asking, but what? She wanted to know what excuse the dog emperor wanted to find. PS 3 more. Good evening, babies. Please give me monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yunsi. Chapter 439. The emperor looked at the queen who was eager to know, and he pretended to be deep. Come closer. The queen frowned, and she was not hard of hearing. But she was eager to know the answer, so she drove the horse closer. The emperor looked at the queen stretching her neck, and he leaned over with a smile and kissed her lips. The queen widened her eyes, and the soft touch on her lips made her stunned for a moment, and then she realized that she was deceived by the dog emperor. When she wanted to retreat, she found that a strong arm was still around her waist and picked her up. When she reacted, she was riding with the dog emperor and sitting in his arms. This scene was very familiar, so familiar that her ears would heat up when she thought about it. After the kiss, the emperor looked at the queen's blushing face and laughed softly. Linger is still the same as before. The queen's face sank. Isn't this obviously saying that she is as easy to deceive as before? Thinking back then, she and the dog emperor went out to ride horses together. They were tired after riding for a long time, so they stopped to rest. The dog emperor said that there was dust on her face. Girls love beauty so much. When they heard the boy say that there was dust on their face, of course they had to wipe it clean. She wiped it with a handkerchief for a long time. The dog emperor said that it was not wiped clean, and asked her to come closer and help her wipe it clean. At that time, she didn't think so much, and obediently moved her face over. That boy was just like now. He not only kissed her but also carried her on his horseback. At that time, she was so shy, but she was particularly greedy for this feeling and liked to stay by his side. Intimate actions are irresistible to girls when they are in love. She thought that she was deceived by the dog emperor at that time. Then she obediently joined the East Palace. The queen said coquettishly, "The emperor's deceiving methods have not changed at all." The emperor looked at the queen, and even his anger was the same as before, without any change. "I just can't help it, just like the boy couldn't help himself when he was throbbing." The queen rolled her eyes. "Can't help it at an age?" She lied and didn't admit it. Just like before, she is not the same as she was back then, so easy to deceive. Seeing that the queen was still unhappy, the emperor smiled softly. Although Linger has a bad temper, she is easy to coax. She smiles after a few words. The queen. How shameless, and she even uses this as a capital to show off. "Your Majesty, why don't you just say that I'm easy to deceive?" "That's because I'm young and inexperienced. Now your Majesty will try to deceive one of them and see if I still believe it." The emperor said, "Listen, if it were someone else, they would have been happy a long time ago, but you are still questioning whether I'm deceiving you." The queen raised her chin proudly. "Your Majesty is deceiving me, otherwise I wouldn't enter the palace." The emperor was not angry, but said, "I just like your temper. Who dares to do something to me except you? Who dares to ignore me? Other women are obedient to me, but you always make me angry. Every time you make me angry, you turn around and ask me to coax you." The queen paused after hearing this, and she doubted the dog emperor's words. She thought about it carefully, and it seemed that every time she got angry, the emperor would leave in anger. Then he would come to her with food the next day or 2 days later. At first, she was really easy to coax, and she would calm down with a few words. As she got older, she got angry less often, and most of the time she didn't say anything, keeping everything in her heart. The dog emperor coaxed her at longer intervals. Just like this time, he coaxed her for so long but still couldn't coax her. She concluded that the older a woman is, the more she wants, and the harder she is to deceive, so it's even harder to coax her. She is the queen, and it's not easy to be generous, so she has to take the initiative to ask for reconciliation? 2 words, no way. The emperor continued, but I just like your type. No matter how gentle and obedient other women are, I don't like them. The queen. Did the dog emperor eat honey before going out today? Why is his mouth so sweet? Unfortunately, she is no longer the woman who is easily deceived. Your Majesty, do you believe what you said? Why didn't you say you didn't like it when you asked me to sleep with you? Emperor. The emperor sighed helplessly. He had just ascended the throne and his position was unstable. The ministers urged him to take a concubine and give birth to a dragon heir as soon as possible. He had not heard from the queen for a long time after he married her. Later, he found out that his mother had made a move behind her back, with the purpose of not wanting the queen to be pregnant. It was not easy to convince his mother to have his first child, but it was still killed by concubine Su. No one knew that the pressure from the harem in the previous dynasty made him feel a little breathless. Everyone felt that when they became emperors, they had the power of life and death, and they didn't have so many scruples. Only when they were in a high position did they know that there were too many things to scruple. So after the queen had a miscarriage, he decided to let other concubines sleep with him. This was the condition he negotiated with his mother. It was also because of the queen's miscarriage that he decided to let concubine Su be the most favored in the harem, so that everyone thought concubine Su was the most favored. Even his mother thought that he favored concubine Su the most, and gradually relaxed his control over the queen. He saw the queen's dissatisfaction. Seeing that the emperor was silent for so long, the queen no longer expected it. Your Majesty, go back. The emperor came to his senses and thought that it was noon now, and the queen should be hungry, so he should go back. Yes, the emperor tightened the reins and was about to ride back. But the queen struggled to get off. I will ride back on my own. The emperor held the queen in his arms and prevented her from moving. I haven't ridden with you for a long time. Let's go back together. After saying that, he squeezed the horse's belly and galloped away, not giving the queen a chance to refuse. The queen was startled. Thinking that the dog emperor was still injured, she couldn't help but start to worry. Your Majesty, please go slower. What if the wound breaks open? Not only did the emperor not slow down, but he whipped the horse, causing it to run very fast. I'm fine. The queen was scared by the galloping all the way. It was cool, but she was really scared. When she returned to the tent, the queen couldn't wait to check the dog emperor's injuries. The emperor was wearing black clothes. When she untied the clothes, she found that they were soaked with blood. The white bandage had turned red. The queen was furious. The emperor is always willful and reckless. How many times has the wound split open? The emperor saw that the queen's eyes were red with anxiety, and he comforted her. Don't worry, queen, you will be fine after a few days of rest, and you will return to the palace tomorrow. The queen said unhappily, who is anxious? The emperor was injured because of me. Now the wound has not healed. If something happens, I will be the sinner. The emperor immediately changed his words. Yes, yes, I am anxious, and the queen is just worried about me. The queen stopped talking and changed the bandage for the queen neatly, and sprinkled some healing powder on the wound. After bandaging the wound, Qing brought hot water and wiped the emperor's body. Looking at this strong figure, I think she was fascinated by him at the beginning. In her 40s, she is so well maintained. If you are not fickle, who will be fickle? After everything was ready, Qing brought in the food, including roasted game, which smelled particularly fragrant. Today we have roasted game. Your Majesty is injured and can only eat light food. You can't eat roasted game. They belong to me, the queen said as she put all the roasted game in front of her. The emperor saw that there were only porridge and side dishes in front of him, and he immediately lost his appetite. Qing said in a gentle voice, the roasted game was sent by the crown princess. She knows that the queen likes to eat it. The queen was very pleased. The crown princess is still good. She knows what I like to eat and always thinks of me. The emperor snorted, you treat the crown princess well, even better than me. The queen ate the roasted game with relish, and the food from the crown princess was still delicious and more fragrant. The emperor saw that the queen was eating so deliciously, and he also wanted to try it. Queen, give me a piece to try. The queen directly refused. No, the emperor is so seriously injured, how can he eat greasy food? When will the injury heal? The emperor sighed and didn't want to eat after a few bites. The queen was full, and only then did she let people clear the bowls and chopsticks away. She was in a good mood after eating. She would return to the palace tomorrow, and everyone was busy today. The emperor was injured, and wanted to rest after lunch. The queen did not sleep well last night, and was a little sleepy. After the emperor lay down on the bed, she went to sleep on the couch. The emperor saw it, got up and came to the couch. Sleep with me. The queen did not want to sleep with the dog emperor, and she had not forgotten the fact that she was cheated today. Forget it, what if I hurt the emperor? The emperor slowly leaned over to look at the queen, and said word by word, you rest with me, I will tell you a secret. Gongzi Yunsi, June 1st is hot, baby's happy Children's Day. Please support with monthly tickets, it is very important. Baby's happy Children's Day on June 1st. A new beginning in June, please support with monthly tickets, and recommended tickets. Baby's good night. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yunsi. Chapter 440. The queen didn't want to face the dog emperor's nonsense, so she lay with her back to the dog emperor, who knew he was injured and still restless. Hearing that the dog emperor used secrets as a condition for her to submit. I have been fooled once, and I will not be fooled a second time. How can the emperor be willing to tell me how many secrets he has in his heart? When the emperor saw that the queen didn't believe it, he was not in a hurry. He sat down on the couch and continued, I keep my word. As long as you take a nap with me, I will tell you. The queen hesitated for a while, then raised her head and saw the emperor looking down at her. His unsmiling expression made her feel that the dog emperor was telling the truth this time. If she takes a nap with the dog emperor, what secret will the dog emperor tell? Just taking a nap is not a problem for her. The problem is, she is afraid of being deceived by the dog emperor. Is the emperor serious? The emperor nodded, of course I take it seriously. The queen hesitated for a while, then sat up on the couch and put on her shoes while looking at the dog emperor. The emperor stood up and took her hand to walk to the bed. The queen felt a little awkward, so she endured it for the sake of keeping it a secret. When she came to the bedside, the queen didn't hesitate, took off her shoes and lay down on the bed, leaving a large space on the outside. The emperor looked at the queen's behavior and smiled. Because he was injured, his movements were not as sharp as before, so he slowly lay down next to the queen. The queen waited for the emperor to lie down, and then she couldn't wait to ask, what secret does the emperor want to tell my concubine? The emperor glanced at the distance between the two of them and said, you are so far away from me, do you think you are sleeping with me? The queen looked at the distance between the two. It was about half a person's distance, which was not too far. She knew that the dog emperor would not tell her secrets so easily. I'm already lying on the bed, I can't let the work fall short. The queen had no choice but to move closer to the dog emperor, and did not stop until she was close to the dog emperor's arm. She raised her head and looked at the dog emperor. Can the emperor speak now? The emperor leaned sideways, put his injured hand on the queen's waist, pulled her into his arms, and whispered, I will tell you when I wake up from my nap. The queen angrily wanted to push the dog emperor away, but when she saw that the wound on his arm had opened several times, she held back forcefully. Your Majesty really doesn't keep his word. I want to get out of bed. After the queen finished speaking, she was about to stand up, but was held down by the emperor. I haven't kept my word. The queen asked dissatisfiedly, then why didn't the emperor say anything? The emperor said calmly, the condition is that you take a nap with me. Do we have to wake up before we talk? Queen. The dog emperor tricked me again. They were already in bed, so the queen had no choice but to endure it. The emperor was actually a little tired for a long time. He was lying on the bed with the queen lying next to him. He woke up after a while. The queen was so angry at first that she couldn't sleep. After a long time, she couldn't resist the sleepiness and fell asleep too. When I woke up, it was already an hour later. The queen was in good spirits after a good sleep. She raised her head to see if the dog emperor was awake. When she looked up, she saw the dog emperor looking down at her. It looked like he had woken up a while before her. In fact, the emperor had just woken up for a while. When he saw that the queen was still asleep, he lay still and didn't move. Linger is awake. Queen. Isn't this nonsense? Are you still asleep with your eyes open? Your Majesty, can you tell me your secret now? If you continue to find excuses not to tell me, you won't be able to enter Fenji Palace in the future. The emperor didn't make excuses this time. He stared at the queen and said, I really wanted to marry you back then. Even if you are not General Chang's legitimate daughter, I still want to marry you. The queen was completely stunned when she heard this. We have to return to the palace early tomorrow and everyone is busy. The emperor returned to the palace early not only because of his injury, but also because he missed his granddaughter. While everyone was busy, Shen Shuwei took the opportunity to let Chengzi roast another rabbit, 2 wild pigeons, and venison. If you don't eat more now, you won't be able to eat these game foods when you return to the palace. Xiao Jinyan saw it and told Qin Xiao, hunt a few more alive and take them away before returning to the palace tomorrow. Qin Xiao lowered his eyebrows and nodded, I obey. Xiao Jinyan looked back at Shen Shuwei, looking at her greedy expression and shaking her head. Qin Xiao looked at Chengzi. After several days, Chengzi seemed to still be angry. He sighed irritably. Wei Qi walked over and heard Qin Xiao sighing. He patted his shoulder and asked, what's the matter, brother? Qin Xiao watched Chun 11 roasting game meat neatly, then turned to look at Wei Qi with a sad look on his face. How do you think I can make a girl happy? Wei Kai's eyes widened, you ask me? How could I know? Aren't you pretty good at making girls happy? Qin Xiao said, how can I coax a girl? Wei Qi didn't know Qin Xiao's sorrow, so he joked, I see you buying this and that for Chengzi, you look like a big lover. Qin Xiao turned to look at Wei Qi, I made Chengzi angry, and she didn't want anything I gave her. Wei Qi saw that his brother was unhappy and realized the seriousness of the matter. Why did you make her angry? In front of his brothers, Qin Xiao didn't hide it, I asked her to be my wife, which scared her. Wei Qi couldn't help but laugh when he heard this, I didn't realize that you were so indecisive and wanted to marry a wife. You were scared. Just take your time. What's the point? After I explained, she became even more unhappy. Qin Xiao sighed after speaking, why is it so difficult to get a wife? Wei Qi said, what's the use of sighing here? You should ask the crown princess to give you a few nice words in front of Chun 11. Maybe Miss Chun 11 can listen. Qin Xiao heard what Wei Qi said and felt that there was some truth in what Wei Qi said. Chengzi was the crown princess's personal maid, so Chengzi would definitely listen to what the crown princess said. After Shen Shuwei had eaten and drank enough, he planned to lie down in the tent. Qin Xiao followed, a little hesitant. It was not until the entrance of the camp that Qin Xiao shouted, Crown Princess. Shen Shu yawned slightly and turned around to look at Qin Xiao, is something wrong? Qin Xiao cupped his fists and saluted, I have something to ask of the crown princess. Shen Chu said softly, "Tell me, if you can help me, I will. If not, let His Highness help you." Qin Xiao looked back at Chengzi, who was eating game not far away. Because he had been busy roasting it just now, he had time to eat it now. He withdrew his gaze and looked at Shen Shuwei. "Princess, my subordinate has made Miss Chengzi unhappy recently." Qin Xiao said as he took out things wrapped in red cloth from his arms and handed them to Shen Shuwei. "The crown princess will help my subordinates give this to Miss Chengzi." Shen Shuwei took it over curiously, opened the red cloth and took a look at it, and found a gold bracelet. It was a very ordinary gold bracelet, and it was a bit old. At a glance, it was obvious that it was old. "Why don't you deliver it yourself?" Qin Xiao said, "My subordinates will give it to me, but Miss Chengzi will not accept it." Shen Chu said softly, "But if you send me Spring Joy and don't accept it, I won't accept it either." Then, Qin Xiao looked at the bracelet in Shen Shuwei's hand and felt troubled. "Princess, how can we make Chengzi accept it?" Shen Shuwei asked, "Why did you make Chengzi angry?" "Subordinate." Qin Xiao scratched his head and said with some embarrassment, "My subordinate said that he wanted to marry Chengzi as his wife, which scared Miss Chengzi." "Is it because of this?" Shen Shuwei looked down at the gold bracelet in his hand and asked Qin Xiao with a smile, "Isn't this a token of love?" Qin Xiao nodded, and then said, Princess, please don't tell Miss Chengzi that this is a token of love, otherwise she will not accept it." "Chengzi is already 18, it's really time to get married." Shen Shuwei put away the gold bracelet and said, "I'll ask you later." Qin Xiao said hurriedly, "Princess, it's better not to ask, Chengzi doesn't want to do it." Shen Shuwei was a little embarrassed when he heard this. "If Chun 11 doesn't want to give it away, I can't give you this bracelet." Qin Xiao also had no idea. He had been single for 27 years, and it was only after meeting Chengzi that he had the idea of starting a family, but he didn't understand girls' hearts, so he frightened others because he was too impulsive. "It's a matter of marriage. Your parents have ordered the matchmaker to tell you. If you really want to marry Chengzi, you have to ask the matchmaker to find out what's going on and ask the matchmaker to put in good words for you," Shen Shuwei suggested. In ancient times, free love was not like modern times. In ancient times, it was very particular, and a girl's reputation was also very important. Qin Xiao suddenly realized what he said and felt that what Shen Shuwei said made sense. He had been too impulsive in the past few days, so it would be strange if Miss Chengzi wasn't angry. Qin Xiao smiled and said, "How about I ask the crown princess to be my matchmaker?" "Shall I be a matchmaker?" Shen Shuwei is still ignorant about dating, let alone being a matchmaker. She waved her hands quickly, "I can't." "How old am I? I can't be a matchmaker." "The crown princess is so smart, it's definitely possible. As long as the crown princess acts as a matchmaker for the subordinates will ensure that if the crown princess wants to eat game in the future, the subordinates will try their best to catch game." Qin Xiao has followed Xiao Jinyan for so long, and he is still more or less interested in Shen Shuwei. Some people know that Shen Shuwei is greedy, and those who mention food are easier to talk to. When Shen Shuwei heard the words, she felt a little moved. In the future, it would be difficult to eat game in the Deep Palace. If Qin Xiao helped her catch it, it would be easier to eat game. "Then let me try." Qin Xiao cupped his fists and saluted, "Thank you, Crown Princess." Shen Shuwei felt that it was necessary to explain something clearly. "I'm going to say something ugly beforehand. If Chengzi doesn't agree, I won't use my status as Crown Princess to suppress her. She must be willing." Qin Xiao nodded, "Of course, my subordinates can't commit banditry." "That's okay." Shen Shuwei returned the bracelet to Qin Xiao, "You take this first. If Chengzi is willing, you can give it to her personally." Qin Xiao looked at the bracelet in his hand, hesitated for a while, and nodded in agreement. "My subordinates listen to the crown princess." Shen Chu said softly, okay, you go and do your work first. I will mention it when Chengzi comes in later. Qin Xiao nodded and turned to work. When Chengzi came in, he first took out the tea set and made tea. Shen Chuwei saw Chengzi come in. She held her chin in her hands and didn't mince words. Chengzi, how about I act as a matchmaker for you? Chengzi placed the brewed tea in front of Shen Chuwei. She was still very curious that her master, who had always been too lazy to ask anything, actually wanted to be a matchmaker. Master, why did you suddenly think of being a matchmaker? Young Master Yunsi, babies, please support me with your monthly vote. Thank you so much. Good evening, babies. Please support me with monthly votes and recommendation votes.